I'll be honest, I haven't played all that much Dark Souls. I started with Dark Souls 1 a couple weeks ago, and given how much I've been enjoying this game, I'm somewhat ashamed to admit that my only other taste of the Souls series has been a tiny bit of Bloodborne. The reason I never seriously got into a Souls game until now is because frankly I was scared. I had heard stories of how absurdly difficult these games were, and absurd difficulty just isn't something I really like in a game. I don't like feeling stressed and frustrated, and I tend to use games to try to avoid those feelings. And I know the point is that after all that stress and frustration, finally overcoming the challenge is meant to feel all the better, but in other games, it just hasn't been worth it for me. But after several recommendations from friends, I finally decided to give Dark Souls a fair shot. And in my first couple of hours playing, I was terrible. I died to the training enemies in the Undead Asylum more than I'm willing to admit, and once I finally beat the Asylum Demon and made it to Firelink, I sort of felt hopeless. I knew I had much harder boss fights to come, but after trying and failing so much on the tutorial, I didn't feel like I would ever be good enough to beat the rest of this game. But I kept going, because despite being somewhat rage-inducing, the game was addicting. My first try through the Undead Burg, I surprisingly actually made it to the Taros Demon, and was killed pretty much instantly. The next 4 hours or so of gameplay involved me taking the same route over and over again, only making it to the boss maybe 1 in 5 runs, and every time I did I would die immediately anyways. After pausing to keep myself from smashing my monitor to pieces a couple of different times, I finally decided it was a good time to look at a guide. I had gone into the game telling myself I was going to do it entirely on my own. No guides, no walkthroughs, nothing. But I figured if I didn't get through the area soon, I would probably stop playing the game anyways, so I broke down and read a guide on the area. Immediately I realized how much I had been missing. There was a merchant only a few steps away from the bonfire that I had totally missed, and he sold a key that let me get some gold pine resin, which would make the next couple of boss fights way easier, as well as some arrows, which the guide told me I would need later, and I wasn't in a position to argue. They then showed me how I could kill the Taros demon by simply using a few plunging attacks, something I had attempted once, died, and assumed wasn't a viable strategy. Right after the boss, the guide showed me how I could use those arrows I bought to shoot the tail of the drake about 30 times, and get a sword that was 3 times better than the one I was using at the time. And I can't even imagine what the next few areas would be like if I was doing it with 3 times less damage. At the time, I took this as bad design. I figured you could practice to get better at fighting bosses, but you can't practice buying items you could have no way of knowing you need until later. What new player would randomly buy 100 arrows from this hidden merchant, and then randomly guess that they should shoot all of them at the tail of this massive dragon, instead of maybe the head or something, and after 20 arrows and the dragon still doing nothing, figuring they should keep at it until eventually a sword randomly appears in their inventory? Literally nobody. No new player would guess that they have to do this. I have no idea how the first ever player figured it out, but I'm willing to bet that every single person after either heard it from a friend or read it in a guide. The game pretty much isn't letting you play it entirely on your own, and at the time this made me angry. I felt like the game was forcing me to play it wrong. But then I thought about it. This was exactly like one of those secrets a friend would tell you about a game you were both playing, and you wouldn't believe them because that sounds so stupid, but then you try it yourself and it somehow actually works. I never felt like I cheated playing Mario when a friend would tell me where to find the last star coin I needed. It felt like we were working together. In other games, using guides or walkthroughs feels dirty. It feels like the developers wanted me to figure something out for myself, and I wasn't good enough to do it, so I had to get help from somebody else. But in Dark Souls, the absolute absurdity of the things they're asking you to do doesn't make you feel like you're playing it wrong when you get help. It feels like it's exactly what the game wants you to do. Every player can't be expected to run into every single wall in the game on the off chance that there's a hidden bonfire behind one of them. One person playing the game figured it out, they shared it with the community, and now everyone playing the game is better for it. It doesn't feel like cheating, it feels like trading tips and secrets between friends, just on a much, much larger scale. And I think that's one of the reasons this game's community is as big as it is. The community, the guides, the walkthroughs are all practically part of the game's design. Veterans teaching new players the strategy for beating a tough boss are just as much parts of the experience of the Souls series as those tough bosses themselves. And the developers clearly knew this, and planned for this, and to me, that's absolute genius. You can tell they planned to have a community built around people helping each other because they built it into the game. The message system acts like mini-guides and walkthroughs inside the game itself. Messages never contain detailed information, mostly just warning you of traps or telling you to try jumping when near a cliff that will kill you, but they are something. Even if you never look up a single guide or get a single tip from a friend, you're still involved in the community and are getting help from other players. And that's how From Software managed to cultivate a massive community around these games, basically through level design. I really can't get over how genius this move is. Any other game studio might try to create a community by creating forums or being active on social media, and while those things can certainly help a community form, having a community be an integral part of your game's design all but guarantees that an active one forms and thrives. There's a lot to love about the Souls series, and I'm sure it will be used as an example of amazing game design well into the future, but most people aren't going to notice that. Audiences know a fun game when they see one, and for me, far more than a well-designed level or a well-balanced weapon, looking back at the Souls series, I'm going to remember that stupid dragon's tail and the community that thought to shoot it 30 times for no reason.